Okay. I think so.
Okay, it is now. My clock says it's not quite 6 o'clock. I do believe that it is 6:00. I have 6:04, so I will call the July 27th, 2022 workshop meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. First item is a discussion and action on appointment of chair and vice chair for the Planning and Zoning Committee for the coming year. I'll entertain any discussion.
I would like to make a motion. Oh, pardon me. I would like to make a motion.
Come close to the mic, please.
Let's go. Currently, Brian Reedy, I am the current chairman of Planning and Zoning. Carolyn Moya is the current vice chair.
I would like, do you want to take these separately or together?
Let's take it separately.
Okay, I would like to first of all nominate Brian for another term as chairman. I think he's done an excellent job these past few years. And I'd like him to continue. A second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Can I sway your vote? Okay. All those in favor of Brian Reed to continue as the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the following year, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I graciously accept. So that will be installed next time, or is it?
No, it's not.
It's not.
And your abstention from the vote. So
I did abstain. Okay. We also have a position for vice chair. Do you have any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I would like to make a motion since I would like to nominate Carolyn Noya to continue as vice chairman, as that was her first year in training for that job, and I would like her to continue it. If everyone would agree. That's my motion.
Motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion and second. All those in favor of Caroline Noya continuing as vice chairman, Smithville Planning and Zoning, say aye. Aye. I did vote in that one. Any opposed? Hearing none, congratulations or condolences, Caroline, which is ever appropriate. Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion on the planting process. Let me get that correct. City Manager Robert Campbell, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you for showing up tonight. I've added some other things, and we can do that because there's no action going to be taken. It's just discussion on some various topics. The first thing I'd like to review is the P&Z basics and our current membership. All of you have seen this before, so these charts will go by relatively fast. The P&Z members, I must be clairvoyant because look, the chairman is Brian Wheeler, the vice chairman Ms. Caroline Noya, Nancy Catherine, Gary Gutierrez, Monica Paz. And did we ever get Monica on the phone yet?
Sure.
Okay. Your support resources from the city staff are as follows: Jennifer Lynch, City Secretary, Tracy Disnowski, Assistant City Secretary, and the actual runner of the P&Z program, Jack Page, Utility Public Works Director. If you haven't heard, he will be retiring, and Edward Belusek will be taking his place. And so he will be supporting these meetings accordingly. Sean Hernandez is our current code enforcement officer, and I'm the city manager. Just some very basic information. There are 5 members that serve concurrent with the term of the mayor. Sad to say you will not be compensated for your service, but thank you for your effort. We appreciate the volunteerism. All kidding aside, this is a very dynamic environment we're in with all the growth. And it's very important to have a fine body of individuals like yourselves reviewing all the variance requests, plat approvals, zone changes, special use permits. So again, thank you for your service. You've already elected a chairman and vice chairman. We meet the first Tuesday of every month, unless there's a special call meeting. Or if there's no request submitted, we do not meet, which hasn't happened often, but sometimes that's a nice reprieve. And your basic function is to review and recommend approval or denial of any variance, zone change, special use permit, and or plat to the city council. Your responsibilities: all of you have completed the Open Meetings Act training. Thank you for that. You have gone through the P&Z orientation. The 2 main chapters that you deal with are Chapter 14 zoning and Chapter 10 subdivision. If you're feeling ambitious, you can look at the other 12 ordinances we have: building codes, nuisance noise, so forth and so on. We do ask that you attend 75% of all meetings, or don't miss more than 3 in a year. Again, with the dynamic nature of what's going on with growth, you play an important part of this process. So again, thank you for your volunteering to serve. You all know this already, but you need to research those requests that come through the city so you're informed and can make a decision accordingly. And I haven't had much of a problem with that with this group of people. So thank you for, again, your attention and coming prepared. We do need to have representation at city council meetings, and we have had that either through Brian or Carolyn. Thank you. And support other tasks as assigned and or requested. Any questions about what your goal is? Awesome. All right, the plat review and approval process. This is something that has evolved. I mean, we're learning as we go with each of these subdivisions that come through. We've made a lot of improvements, but like the council meeting 1 or 2 months ago, I was asked to do a flow chart on the process, and I think it helps to visualize what actually happens when someone submits a minor plat or a major plat. So that's what I've done.
I'm going to try to speak louder when I get up here because I like to touch the screen. A developer or a citizen will typically fill out a P&Z application for $675 non-refundable when they want to do a variance, a special use permit, a zone change, or a plat. So when this request comes in, you have to ask, is this a minor plat or a major plat? You have a decision tree. If it's less than 5 lots, that's a minor plat. We still review it administratively, but there's not a lot of hoopla that goes along with that. When you have a subdivision plat, that becomes a little more complex. So that would be a major plat. And if it's neither of these, the citizen or the developer has filled out the wrong section of the form, and we will help educate them and identify what they truly came for us to. So that path ends there. If it's a minor replat, we review. If it's a major plat, we also review, but we go through what's called an administrative approval. As I said, we've grown through this process. If you haven't spent much time with the subdivision code, it's multiple pages of oh my. So I took those multiple pages of oh my and put it in a checklist form, which you have in your package. We'll talk about that a little more later in the presentation. So if you get through administrative approval, if you don't get through administrative approval, if you find things wrong with the preliminary plat, which we have on many occasions, you deny it. And it goes back to the developer or the citizen to resubmit. And then this is that move. Not approved, staff review approved, over here. If it does get approved, then the shot clock starts. Through the legislation 2 sessions ago, or one.
2019.
2 sessions ago. Yes, one, whatever. You have 30 days to approve a plat once it's officially accepted. And that's why this process of administrative approval becomes so important. You do not want to accept a plat that's not going to meet requirements or too soon. So we want to make sure.
Robert, let me jump in. I'm going to try not to jump in too much.
Okay.
But what's
Mike.
what for me, one of the important things is when Robert's talking about administrative approval, it hadn't gotten to us yet.
Correct.
Right. And so as long as it's in that loop, we haven't seen anything yet. But that's why, and I rely on the fact that it has gotten to P&Z with the understanding that I know that it's been through the administrative approval. I know whoever over here in this building has been looking at it, and I have some level of confidence, a high level of confidence that, you know, they have done what's required under the ordinance before it gets to us. Which is except flat 30-day shot clock. Okay.
And that's the beauty of the checklists, because when we do give administrative approval, they are signed and they're dated. That documents the beginning of the 30-day shot clock. And you will get that in your packets. And you have that in your current packet that we're going to, y'all are going to review on Tuesday. Correct? I will talk a little more about that. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Once the shot clock starts, well, if you take no action, it gets approved automatically by the legislation. If you don't do anything, it's approved. So we want to make sure we're all on the same page when we schedule these meetings and make the public notices, which is what happens next. You've accepted the preliminary plat, 30-day shot clock starts, you schedule a P&Z meeting and public hearing. Notify property owners within 200 feet, publish public notice in the paper. Hold the P&Z meeting and public hearing. If you approve the plat, yes, it goes to city council for further review, comment, and approval, or denial. If you don't approve it, you have to issue, and this is a mistake that a learning opportunity that has been improved over time. A couple years back, we denied one, and it went to the council anyway. Under the legislation, if the P&Z, and this is where you're not a recommendation body, you become the authority having jurisdiction. If you deny a plat, you have to do a written order identifying the specific requirements that were not met. And then the developer has to address those requirements at some time. There is no time limit for him to address those requirements, but we have to give him that written order within 10 days. He can go away for a year, 2 years, whatever. When he submits, when he does a resubmittal, we have 15 days to hold another meeting and review the plat. So there's shot clocks and shot clocks if you deny it. But the legislation is very clear. You basically have 3 choices. You can approve with conditions, or deny. If it's met all the requirements per your code, per the administrative review, you have no other choice but to approve. Okay? There are times in the administrative review where we identify one section or one criteria that's not met. That may force a variance, which you've all been through, except Garrett and Monica, with the Garwood Park subdivision. With the administrative review process, it was approved, but there was one issue, and that was what? Remember? Block width. Okay? So we pushed it forward with the caveat that, okay, developer, you're gonna have to get approval from the P&Z and the council to allow this variance so that you now can meet all the criteria in the administrative approval or the subdivision code. Okay? So that's what happened with Garwood Park. They got the variance, which meant they met all the requirements, and the P&Z and the council had no other choice but to approve. In the past, if there was a grudge against the developer, you just didn't like the way it looked, you could deny it. That's no more of this past legislation. Questions?
I guess I'm seeing that if you have the issue, the written warning in 10 days, developer can resubmit, it could be 2 or 4 years, whatever. It still goes back through the whole process.
We go back to, once he resubmits, it goes back to admin approval. Did you take care of what was wrong? And are you now meeting all the requirements? If the answer is yes,
Then it goes back through the rest.
go back to the process.
And I guess the reason I asked that is what if something?
I'm sorry, yeah, 15 days. It's 15 days. That's the difference in the initial. If you get denied, and the developer comes back and fixes and resubmits that plat with the corrections, we have 15 days to address it. Otherwise, it's approved automatically.
But say it's several years down the road, something changes with our codes.
Yeah,
Still,
well,
does that change anything, or does it still get approved with what we asked them to fix?
under vested rights, whatever he submitted, they submitted the code under when they submit the plat is the code they have to follow.
So they don't need to resubmit with another $675 fee. It's
No,
the same project.
It's a continuation.
Okay.
And I believe it's 2 years for a preliminary plat.
I think there is a deadline.
There's a deadline of 2. You can't go more than 2 years, otherwise it's off the table.
And then they start all with the whole process off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Robert, just to clarify, if they're going to want a variance, because we went recently through this whole thing,
Mhm.
they have to ask for a variance before the plat is approved.
That's correct. Otherwise, they wouldn't meet the requirements
Yeah.
of the subdivision code. Now, what was interesting with Garwood Park is that they requested a variance, and I have a section I'm going to talk about, but it may be appropriate just to do it now. Any questions about this flow chart?
Good job.
It's amazing how helpful it is to visualize it.
Very good job, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of back up a little bit and talk about the administrative review. There are basically 3 checklists. You have preliminary plats, basic what has to be on all drawings. You have design standards that have to be met, and you have final plat. Okay. So what we do, we start going through. Developer submits his preliminary plat drawing. We take a look, and there are requirements. Article 2, Section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 talk about what you have to have on the drawing: a scale, a north arrow, contour lines, 2-foot contour lines, squigglies of where the water is going to go. You have to identify your trees, their locations. So these are the basic things under that particular checklist that you have to address. Article 3, minimum design standards, section 1 to 7 are design standards that you have to have and meet in the preliminary plat. Okay, your block widths, your basic layout, your block lengths. You have to be between 300 and 600 feet for length, 240 and 300 foot for width. Sidewalks, all these things have to be identified in your submittal. And that's another checklist. And this happens to be Garwood Parks. They did not comply with block width. And what's interesting about this, under the variance criteria, which we'll talk about in a moment, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, you've got 5 criteria that you have to meet. Basically, variances, the answer is no, unless you can meet these 5 criteria. One of those criteria is special conditions. Okay, our special conditions do not allow the developer to develop his property as he would like. That's the variance portion. The particular Garwood Park, the design checklist says that you can have block lengths that are less than or more than 300 feet if there's an unusual case. In Garwood Park, they came to ask for a variance. Had you not granted the variance, they would have gone for a usual case under this section. Okay, but since you granted the variance,
you now met all the checks and you could approve the plan. So we have a very similar situation on Tuesday. They also have asking for a variance for block width less than 300 feet. And it's both a special condition and an unusual case because they are bound by two highways. I mean, Highway 71 and Route 230. It's an irregular shaped lot. They got a floodplain. So it's very similar to what Garwood Park did. But if you decide not to grant the variance, they're going to go after unusual case for the very same reasons. Okay, so we have basically the same scenario coming up on Tuesday.
Could they do it under the same request? Or would they have to file a second request?
No, it's
It's
separate and distinct. You ask for a variance. If you deny the variance, he's going to argue that, oh, well, under section 4, we have an unusual case because of the irregular shaped lot and the pre-existing plat. You have the subdivision, the Hernandez subdivision to the west there, and you've got Highway 71 and Route 230.
I think Nancy is asking, can it be in one application?
yeah, can it be one
Yeah.
application and all acted on in the same meeting?
Well, here's the thing, yes, you can. The variance will be taken on itself, and then you'll
Yes.
go to another agenda item to address the plat. If you deny the variance, then he's going to talk about why you should approve the plat, because it's met all the criteria except block width, but there's an exception that says except in unusual cases.
Yes.
So that was the logic that Chase Hodges used when he came before you. It's the same logic I think that Enclave is going to do as well. That makes sense?
Yes, as Brian said, I just want to be sure it can all take place at the same meeting. They're not
It
going
will.
to have to come
No.
back. Okay.
So it's not a resubmittal.
Correct, it's not. And again, if it meets all requirements, you have no other choice by law than to approve. If you decide not to grant the variance or decide that it's not an unusual case, then you have to do an order that says that you're not in compliance with section 4, article 3, whatever, 4 block width. And you can address it and come back to the process. But I don't think that's really on the table because we've already kind of set precedent for very similar conditions. All right, so you got these checklists. I've got, section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. I've got sections, article 3, section 1 through 7. The final plat, that's the big boy. That's like 13 pages of stuff that has to be done. And we don't do a lot of final plats. There's a time frame between when the preliminary is done, construction happens, and the final plat gets submitted. We have done a few. Herda is the last one we did. And I'm going to talk about that process as well. Any questions about this? I've given you copies, blank copies of all the checklists, and they correspond by section, by paragraph, sometimes by sentence to what's in the subdivision ordinance. Okay, a very useful and helpful tool for the staff to review these things. All right. The process in a bigger 10,000 foot view. You get administrative approval, the staff does that. Get preliminary plat approval from the P&Z and council. You still have an opportunity to catch errors or mistakes in the construction plan review approval process. We use a third-party engineer, to make sure that their design, the construction drawings, which are very thick and detailed, 30 pages. I have some samples over here. Meet all your requirements, local, state, and international building codes. They review it for that. They review for zoning. They review for, do you have the sidewalks? Is your lot width 50 feet? Do you have it in a lot size of 6,500? All that stuff is checked. Once it's checked, then they stamp the drawings. And this process in and of itself, once the developer submits his plan set, the third-party consultant turns them around in 10 days, 7 to 10 days. If there are issues, the developer has to address those issues. Oh, you don't have enough drainage capacity here, because your analysis doesn't say that your post-development flow will be better than or equal to the pre-development flow. So they have to address that. And that can take time. Like with M5 subdivision, that took 1.5 years for the engineer to get this stuff together to respond to the comments that our third party found. Garwood Park is currently in this process. They submitted their plans to us a month ago. Our guys got out in 7 days, but they've been holding it for 3 weeks. They had a death in one of the companies that's reviewing the civil engineering section. So that's why that's stalled, okay? Once the drawings are stamped, which I'll show you what a stamped drawing looks like, you can issue a construction permit. The construction building permit is the review fee, whatever BBG charges us, it can be $8,000 to $10,000 plus 0.5% of the total infrastructure construction cost. Okay, so for $1 million, that's $5,000. For $1 million worth of infrastructure value, that's $5,000. Once you pay that, they can move there. Okay, construction can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And things change during construction. Oh, I need to move this a little bit here. Move this. This is our process now. You may have heard, if you're at the council meeting, Jason was talking about, what do you want to do a final plat before? No, I want to get construction done because things do change. And once you submit the final plat, you document those changes and it becomes ordained for the county. Okay. So that's kind of the whole process. Now, interject other fun stuff like annexation, 380s, performance-based incentives, that extends the process even further. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between the 380 agreements and doing the capital impact fees? And we had talked about this years and years ago, and I cannot remember the details of what the answer is.
Yeah, we don't have impact fees. That takes an ordinance to do. The 380 agreement is a performance-based incentive program that if you meet the milestones, Mr. Developer, we'll give you maybe a tax refund. You have to pay your taxes, but you build or sell the number of lots, or build number of homes or sell the number of lots you agreed to, then you get reimbursement. Interestingly enough, I always talk about the 380 process, how all this money is given away. The Hernandez subdivision, the 380 there, they annexed in. There's 50 homes there, thousands of dollars of value of property taxes. What we paid or reimbursed Herda Development Company, $17,000. That's it.
So why is there so much discussion?
Because people don't understand this process. They don't understand the 380, that it's quid pro quo. I am not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm going to develop it, and that's what I got hired for, was to take the best interest of the city at heart.
Right.
So developers are not going to come in here. I'm not doing deals on the table like I was accused of. I'm trying to get the best benefit for both parties, more to the city side than the developer side. He's going to make his money. But we need that property tax revenue going forward, and the revenue from utilities, if we get it, and the houses, that increased sales tax, that increase, for all the reasons you know. Okay, but I think there's just some confusion about 380s in general. You know, I have written, 30 emails back, not a bunch, I've done eight 380s in my tenure here. But it's a lot of negotiation back and forth. It's a good way to incentivize, because I can't annex. We cannot, as a city, annex property. It all has to be done voluntarily. So that's why people are willing to do 380s. Okay, well, I'm going to annex. What are you going to do for me? But we don't do a lot. We don't, like somebody said that, oh, you're paying them to come here. No, we're not. It's credits. And typically we get more benefit than any money that we reimburse. Okay, good question.
Let me jump in again.
Yes.
Just because I'm just thinking about the mechanics of P&Z. Yeah, this is more for our new member than the others, because we've been through this. The general public, as Robert said, they don't understand the process, but unless they're a developer or they've had some experience with this because of another subdivision or something, I mean, this is new to them. And one of the things they don't understand is when we do the public hearing for P&Z, if we're in the preliminary plat approval, we get lots of questions about drainage and development and what are these houses gonna look like and all of these other things. And as Robert said, there's more safeguards in the program that comes after the P&Z approval. And I have at times gotten a bit frustrated because I know what our authority is and what we can do. But it's a public hearing and you discuss these things, but we need to stay focused on what it is we can and can't do as we begin what P&Z's responsibilities are. It's not to say that the concerns that are being raised aren't appropriate, but that's not this hearing. And I look to Robert a lot of times to bail me out or bail us out so he can stand up and explain that those concerns, you'll have time to address those. That's not here at P&Z on the preliminary plat approval. There are continued safeguards. There will continue to be discussions. Those concerns will be addressed later on. But sometimes that's where some of the most contentious stuff, because people are coming from emotion. This is affecting them very personally. And that's part of why this is a public hearing, to give them an opportunity to express those things. That's all.
I have a question to ask along that line. Because one of the things that has concerned me about one of the subdivisions was, and it was the only thing, and I had not seen the checklist, and I don't know if it's something that's covered in the preliminary plat, that kind of thing. And that is emergency access, entrance and exits.
Okay.
That's one of the things when I look at a plat, I'm looking at is should I not be? Is that
No,
something that
that's
happens?
that's fine, but you also understand, again, this is a learning opportunity. Fire codes require you to be able to get in and out of a subdivision.
Yes.
But if you think about every subdivision we have here, there's only one entrance in and out.
I know.
The cul-de-sacs allow the fire engine to turn around, or the street is wide enough to do so. You don't have to have two entrances into each subdivision. That I think, number one, is something that people don't understand as a requirement. And that is a concern unless you know that requirement. So, but those are part of the design criteria that if it's wrong in the construction drawings, it's going to be caught.
Okay.
Yeah. So as Brian said, there are safeguards along the way, and that's what this third-party review company does for us. It just catches those type of things that we might miss.
Which you'll see on the charges after that preliminary plan approval. And one of the things that I really used, I really appreciate that y'all started doing it, is that checklist where we've done the administrative approval, preliminary administrative approval. Can I check the boxes? And when I get that in the packet, I look at it and say, okay, which one are the ones that say no? Because they list out all the criteria they have to meet in order for the preliminary plat to be approved. And if I see the city
Administratively approved.
administrative, at that point, to get to us, thanks for the clarification. That's what I meant. It has gone through that initial administrative approval by the city to check to see if it does meet the requirements to get it to us for the preliminary plat approval. And I use that checklist and go, oh, well, they didn't work for us because they've already told us which ones they didn't meet. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't go back and take a look at that, have questions about it, and understand what is there, that it has met those requirements for administrative approval. And focus on the things that the variance or whatever it is that has to be met that wasn't checked, yes. But I use that, I don't want to call it a crutch, it's a tool. It's great to have. It helps us focus on what it is that we need to be looking at to make sure at that level, at the preliminary plat approval for P&Z, that we're looking at the things that we're supposed to be looking at.
And one of the things you've gotten caught up into is drainage. People are very concerned about it. Well,
Always.
what about drainage? That's going to be caught in the third-party review because your post-development flow must be less than or equal to pre-development flow, and you're going to have to do a drainage analysis and engineer whatever system that's going to ensure that your water doesn't go on neighbor's property. But yeah, I remember I've seen people ask, what about drainage?
I think, what comes to my mind when you talk about access, especially for fire apparatus and stuff like that, is I think that's where we catch it is the block width. And if you're gonna have cars parking on the street or not. So if we issue a variance, we need to make sure that, if cars are parking on the street, there's still enough room for a fire truck to make that turnaround at the end of the street. So I think that's where that comes in with us. Not necessarily, doesn't come to mind, how many entrances does it have? Just can it get in and can it get out?
And a lot of these have deed restrictions. Hernandez PUD have deed restrictions. M5 has deed restrictions. There was no 380 with M5. Enclave is going to have deed restrictions that will prevent parking. Some may prevent parking on the road, but there's a minimum width that we have to maintain by our subdivision ordinance. And even with 2 cars, you can still get a fire truck based upon the 28, 30-foot curb to curb.
Well, this checklist then is going to be a wonderful help for us. I'll be like Brian, I'm going to go say where no's are.
In your P&Z packet that you just got, there are 2 checklists. There's a 2.1 and then the 3.0 that gives you the design standards. So we've gone through that. And the only one that doesn't meet right now for the enclave is the block width.
Yeah.
Of which they're asking the variance.
I don't-
Which segues me to the next chart.
I don't,
So question on that block width thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not doing it right, but like in here on your preliminary plat deal, section 4, item 12, it says the block width shall not exceed 300 feet. But then you talk about the block length, 300. So is that 300 accurate or is there a different number?
No, the block lengths are between 300 and 600 feet. The block widths are 240 to 300.
So you can have a split block.
And that's the way the city was laid out and what they adopted. Most, when you have an irregular shaped parcel, it's almost impossible to get a block width because a city block is 300 feet. We've had some training on this before, but I want to make sure that reiterate that you can approve or deny a variance, and there's language that has to be spoken when you do so. And here's the language here. They're in your packet. Brian does a good job of
Helping us.
saying that. So this is verbatim, and to the variance regarding special conditions, you see B and C. And that's why the variance is being requested, because there are special conditions. With Garwood Park, there are special conditions. With Enclave, there are special conditions. So if you make the motion, make sure you do so using these guidelines. Okay.
I think what we've done in the past is just read them all.
Yeah.
Are you saying rather than read them all
No,
with exceptions, we should pick out the ones that apply?
no, you read them all because you
Read
have to
them
read.
all.
It's and gate. It's
Okay.
all of them.
Yeah, see, it's and. They have to
Okay.
meet all of them. It's not an or.
I just want to clarify.
No, that's good. That's a good question.
Did Jason say that at one point he wanted us to verbatim A through E? Is that still the case?
I thought, I mean, I haven't heard.
I thought it was too, but we need to check that because there's a lot more words, but
Okay.
Better safe than sorry. So until you're told otherwise, this is how you need to make the motion.
And I don't know if it's covering this. And you all know I'm an attorney, but I am not the city's attorney or the planning and zoning commission attorney at all. But I am very familiar with making a record. And part of what we're doing, particularly when you're talking about a variance, and the reason you have to go through these things, we're creating a public record that the evidence has been developed to support those conclusions. That's the legal standard. That's how city councils and city members get sued, which we won't go into. But that's why it's so important for us to, in the course of the public hearing, somebody's got to say, somebody has to give testimony, somebody has to give evidence that enables us to reach the conclusion that those conditions have been met. And that's why a lot of times I'll just start asking questions, not because I necessarily do I need to know the answer, because I probably already do know the answer. It's in their packet where I can add up, I know. But oftentimes the people, and this is not subdivisions, this is somebody coming out and saying, I want to put in a garage apartment. They don't know what they need to say. And I think it's important for us because this is a hearing, it's a public hearing, I shouldn't say hearing. It's an open meeting. And we need to develop, and I'll ask those questions and get them to say the things that I think they need to say, so we can hear them say it, so that we can reach these conclusions.
Let me interject.
One of the process improvements we did on the application itself, the applicant has to address each of these criteria. So that also helps you evaluate to make an informed decision and can prompt you to ask those questions in public so the public knows.
And sometimes those responses says, because I want it, and the next one is, well, see answer above, and see answer above.
Well, then go to denial.
But that's why.
River in Egypt.
Also, I think some of this is also good to have it in the record because 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now, they're gonna say, what the hell were they thinking back then? And say, well, we based on the information we had at the time, based on what the standards were at the time, this is why we approved it or not. That's just, you talk about making a record of stuff.
Good discussion. Okay, something that's been going on for about, we work on 6 months, 7 months.
We're trying to obviously understand our subdivision ordinance is horribly outdated, as a lot of our other ordinances, and how do you get elephant one bite at a time? But we have been attacking this for 6 months. I have given you all a copy of the draft rewrite of the subdivision ordinance. These take a lot of time to do. It took us 1.5 years to get the zoning ordinance updated. And this will probably be a better part of a year to do the subdivision ordinance. But I'm pleased to say that Jason, those of you who are at the meeting, council meeting, he knows his stuff. He's the right person for the job. He's also one of our city attorneys. He has done an update. And there's a summary of changes here. What I need you to do, we're not going to go through this tonight. I want you to go through this on your own time, make notes, and give me that those edits or modifications, and I'll make sure they get incorporated. So some of the things that we have to decide upon as a community, as a council, as a staff, P&Z, do you want the minimum lot width to be 50 feet? Should it be 60? Should it be 45? Do you want to allow tiny homes? So there's so much that has to be addressed, but you have to start someplace. So his task was basically update all the references to some of the Texas administrative codes that no longer exist. Clean it up first. Make the changes that make sense. We're adding some things like a parkland section, updating our tree section, different types of plats. So it's an enormous undertaking. So if you want to take chapter 10 and do a comparison, you're welcome to do so, or just start fresh here. But understand our subdivision ordinance is grossly inadequate in many areas, except in unusual cases. What does that mean? Okay, it's too subjective. And so things like that, we will remove. And then there's the public input. You have to have opportunity for the public to understand what you've done, what you want to do, get the input, get it incorporated, have the P&Z and council agree to this and the staff, and then codify it. So it's quite a process. But again, I think the right person is doing it. But we're a long way from getting it done. So I need your help to see what you think of this ordinance. Give me your edits and I'll make sure they get incorporated.
Could we get it in an Word document?
Yes.
We can convert, can we?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what I sent you was a PDF, but we can do a conversion or just have Jason send it. Personally, I'm impressed, right? Because I can't do that on the computer. I have to write it.
And
You can make good notes on there though.
The next steps with this is I want to incorporate your comments. You can take a look at the slide into the working draft, get that from Jason. And again, as a staff, we need to meet because the staff deals with this. Excuse me, much more than the public or you guys. Why do we have a curve radius? Why is it 500 feet? Why is 28 feet good for street width? There's some things that we have to address internally to make it make sense for the public. So we have our work to do. But if you guys can give me your inputs within a month, I'd appreciate that. So we're looking at the end of September to have a draft, preliminary draft of the entire chapter 10. Thinking about scheduling a joint P&Z council workshop. I've done that in the past. Twice. One was a fiasco, one was successful. So I'll take your guidance if you want to do that. Otherwise, we can get your input, make the changes, get it to the council and say that, hey, P&Z has looked at this, this is what they think. The final draft ready for adoption should be ready in November. We're in the budget process now, so this is taking a back burner from my staff, but Jason Rammel is still working on this as we speak. Okay. That's it. You have any other questions or discussion topics that I may have missed or that you want to talk about before Brian will entertain a motion to adjourn?
So, speaking of Jason, he made several recommendations at the city council meeting as far as rescheduling the standard first Tuesday of the month P&Z meetings, and then also the approve, deny, and approve with conditions. Any consideration into that, or will we continue the way that
We're still evaluating that. We in fact made a conscious decision about 3 or 4 years ago to slow the roll. Some of the issues we had with other developers were because we were just pushing it too fast. P&Z would meet 1 week and then the council the next.
5 days later.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll take a look at that. Like he said, let's maximize that time between the P&Z and the council, but not violate the 30-day shot clock with respect to subdivision ordinance. We'll take a look at that. Sure. And the other one was what? The
approve, deny, and
Oh,
approve
yeah.
conditions. He kind of suggested don't ever approve with
with conditions. That's correct. And that we had that discussion before you got here. It's basically two. You can approve or deny. Because conditions become subjective.
And that's kind of what you had up on the screen. So I just wanted to reiterate what you said, make sure that's the direction.
Well, that's the way the legislation reads today. Now, it may not be this, I think I'm gonna take his advice and say, let's either approve or deny. Thanks again for taking time. This is a lot of information. These are tough to pull off, but I think definitely value added and would entertain doing more if we need to do so. That's up to you all.
Water, appreciate it, bro.
That's an awesome job.
All right.
All we have right now is to get a Word version to the whole team. I think that's the only action that we're taking out of here, and then have them review this within a month.
And then I'll ask about the verbiage on that, or how they need to do the motion.
You don't need a word.
And the word version will be of this.
Yes, sir.
She wants to to the end of September,
No, I want your input
by the end of August.
Sooner than later. I mean, a couple weeks would be great. But no later than the end of August. But right now, we're all getting the budget, and it's a heck of a killer budget this time.
I don't need the word out. I'll work in here and you.
Well, you're gonna get it anyway, because it's just easier to send to everybody than
Oh, good.
pull you out.
You won't be able to read my handwriting, so I'll take the word version and put the little edit notes in there for you.
If I do it in handwriting, I'll write something. No, it's easy.
Yeah.
I might have something misspelled on the misspellers.
All right.
If you don't have any other matters,
Adjourn.
I second that we adjourn.
motion second to adjourn, all in favor, say aye.